This is episode number 166. There's a lot of hype about passive income on the internet. Is it true or is it a myth? That's what I'm talking about.
This is the Red Podcast. How to take your idea and make a name for yourself within your industry and beyond. Spread your message. Attract a following. Rise above the noise. Here's your host, David Hooper.
Side note before we get started today, if you've been watching what's happening with Walter Palmer, the name might not be familiar to you, but you may know the story. He's a Minnesota dentist, went over to Zimbabwe, lured a lion off of protected ground. This is big game trophy hunting. Shot it, chopped its head off, left the body, and I'm assuming mounted the head somewhere. Anyway, he's a Minnesota dentist. What's happening to him is fascinating when it comes to what can happen on the internet when the internet turns on you. And the reason I'm mentioning it here is I just finished a book by Jon Ronson. You may be familiar with him. He's written a lot of great books, The Psychopath Test, Them. He's a fantastic author. And the new book that he's got is called So You've Been Publicly Shamed. And if you're curious about this, it's a very interesting read. The author, Jon Ronson, book title, So You've Been Publicly Shamed. I'll have information on the book and also on Walter Palmer. You've got to see what people have done to his Yelp page at redpodcast.com/166 in the episode notes. This is the Red Podcast, the podcast for influencers. If you're a blogger, podcaster, speaker, marketer, if you're somebody with an idea and you're looking to spread it, this is the podcast for you. The focus is how to take that idea, make a name for yourself, and make money. On this episode, the subject, passive income. Is it a myth? Is it a big lie perpetrated by people trying to make money off of other people? Well, that's what I'm going to talk about, including sharing my own passive income story. Passive income has always been a popular topic among entrepreneurs and others looking to make money. In the music business, we call that mailbox money. It's royalties, it's licensing deals where you just go out to the mailbox and there's a check waiting for you for something that you haven't necessarily done, but something that you own. But the book, The 4-Hour Workweek, took that to a whole new level outside of the entertainment industry, outside of the intellectual property industry. Popularized passive income, or at least the concept of doing 10% of the work that most people are doing. That's not necessarily passive, but 10% better than 100%. Question is it true? A lot of people talk about it, but are people actually doing it? The answer, absolutely they are. Let me tell you a story. I currently live in Nashville, Tennessee. This is actually where I grew up. And on my way to school, every day for 10 years, I would pass a street. It's actually two streets, 16th and 17th Avenue in Nashville. We call it Music Row. And Music Row is record labels, it's recording studios, and it's also something called publishing companies. As a kid, everybody in my world was involved with music somehow. Their fathers were songwriters, their parents were musicians, parents owned studios. Everybody that I knew was involved in music. That's just what we do here. But I didn't really understand how it worked. I understood when I drove down Music Row, I would see the record labels. I knew how they worked because I would buy records. I would see recording studios because people would have to record the music that they put on records. But I didn't understand the publishing companies. And the publishing companies were some of the nicest buildings on Music Row. So fast forward a few years later, like a lot of Nashvillians, I got involved with music myself. I'm playing guitar. I'm thinking that I'm going to be a professional musician, so I go to school for music. And one of my teachers told me, he said, the big money in the music business is in music publishing. But at that time, I still don't really understand what music publishing is. So let me explain it to you in the way that it was explained to me. Music publishing is owning the songs that are recorded, that eventually go on the records, that are sold. They are the songs that get played in concerts. They are the songs that get played on television shows. They're the songs that get played in arenas. Not the recording of those songs, but the underlying composition. Words and music that people play to make records, to perform, to do whatever with. If you own the song, you're not attached to the artist that records it. Your song could be recorded by many different people. And to give you a great passive income example, I've got a buddy of mine, Buzz Kaysen. In 15 minutes, this guy wrote a song called Everlasting Love. It was a hit in the 60s. It was a hit in the 70s. It was a hit in the 80s. Every decade, 90s, 2000s, it's been recorded hundreds and hundreds of times. You've probably heard the disco version. U2 cut a version of it. Every time it's released, every time that song is played on the radio, regardless of who the artist is, every time the song is used in a television show or in a movie, Buzz makes money. Now that is passive income at its finest, and a great example that yes, you can do the work once and get paid again and again and again. You probably heard that the music business is dead, yet music publishing still exists, and that's the big lesson. This applies to you, even if you know nothing about music, have nothing to do with it, you're not creative at all. The big point here is this, that once you own the copyright, you can follow the copyright wherever it goes. So that's why I brought up the Buzz Kaysen story. He wrote a song, Everlasting Love. It gets cut. There's a disco version of it. It gets cut by U2. It gets cut by Gloria Estefan. You follow it wherever it goes, but it's even bigger than that. Let's say people aren't buying what we call records anymore, CDs, tapes, any kind of physical item. They're not buying those anymore. Well, you follow that copyright to streaming. He owns the copyright. Doesn't matter if records are sold as long as people are consuming the music in some way. Once you own the copyright, you follow it wherever it goes. For music, that's placing something in film and television. That's putting something up on YouTube. Mentioned the streaming services, Apple Music, Spotify. It's cover songs as other people doing versions of your song. And the same thing can happen to you. Let's say you've got an idea for a book. The print book business, very similar to the music business, in that you had a physical manifestation of an idea. It wasn't on plastic or vinyl. It was on paper. And that went away. We don't have that anymore. But if you own the copyright, you can follow that to Kindle, to digital books, to audio books or other derivatives, YouTube, movie and television rights. I've had stuff licensed to film and television. I've had books licensed to film and television before. There's a great movie. It came out a few years ago. It's got Steve Martin. It has Alec Baldwin in it. It's called It's Complicated. You may have seen it. And there's a scene when Steve Martin is driving and he's playing an audiobook. I own that audiobook, and because of that, I did a 5-figure deal for just a very little bit of content. Is that passive income? You tell me. They contacted me, hey, we want to use this. We think it fits great. I negotiated a deal, so I'm having to do that kind of work. I had to sign a contract. That's a little bit of work. But more or less, I just collected a check. They used something that I owned. I never, in my wildest dreams, thought that this particular book, which was just a side project that I did to test something, to test a distribution method, put this thing out there, somebody found it, put it in a movie, I collected a 5-figure payout. Not bad, right? That's the power of owning your content. And if you're interested at all in passive income, don't believe the hype about it, that you can put up a website or you can put up junk and just sit back and collect money. You've got to have something good that people are willing to pay for and that's going to last. Anything that Google does, any kind of fads, any kind of trends. I'm talking about evergreen content that people can use, not just a website, not just a bunch of advertising links, not a bunch of AdSense that you're spamming out and trying to put everywhere. You want solid content that's worth owning and that people are worth paying for. Most people don't think like this. Most people who are trying to make money online fall into a big trap, and this keeps them from doing something similar. That is, it's easier to get paid doing one-on-one work, doing coaching, doing consulting. That's the easiest thing that you can do. You don't have to create any content, maybe a sales letter, maybe you got to get on the phone, but more or less taking money, what we call dollars for hours, is the easiest thing that you can do. So people jump in with doing coaching, they do consulting, or if they are creating content, they're creating content for somebody else. They're writing for magazines, they're writing for websites, They're writing ebooks, ghostwriting, probably the worst, because then you're not even owning the content. You have no chance of making it into a book or of repurposing it, of doing something else with it. You're either sending it out to a magazine, to a website where they own the content, or you're giving it to somebody else who's maybe a better marketer than you are. You're doing all the heavy lifting. They know how to market better than you do, and they make all the money because of that. I want to jump back into what I call temporary passive income. I mentioned it just a second ago. You can make passive income for a time via websites, but almost anything that's website related, that's going to be temporary, and that's because we rely too heavily on Google or other links from other websites to send us traffic. If you're providing your own traffic, you found a way to buy traffic, do an arbitrage thing, buy low, then make more money on clicks. Well, you can keep that going for a little bit longer. I know plenty of guys making money on AdSense. I was one of them, had over 800 sites at one time, many of them making money via AdSense. Google changes something, bam, you're done. That's it. Game over. End of story. If you are hoping to make passive income from a blog, and this is why most of this stuff is temporary, the blog needs to be updated. That's not really passive. I know a guy, he's making $20,000 to $30,000 per month. He's been doing it for the last 10 years, $20,000 to $30,000 a month. Actually, he used to make a little bit more like $30,000 to $40,000, and you can kind of see the trajectory. Although $20,000 to $30,000, not that bad. But most of his traffic is because of one post he wrote. One post. The old post gets traffic. It gets enough traffic that some people hang out on the blog. Some people click. He makes a little bit of money. He's still going. But again, talking about, is this passive income? It is not, because he has to keep new posts coming, keep updating that blog on a frequent basis to keep that old post running. If Google thinks that this is an old site, that it's not worth anything, that nobody cares anymore, it's been abandoned, if something happens to it, this thing is dead. So in order to keep that passive income, he still has to work, and you would rather not have to do that if at all possible. That's why I'm talking about owning the content, owning that evergreen content that people want to license, and you can let them market for you, but you still get a piece of everything that they do. A much better situation. The other great thing about that is you're not at the mercy of search engines. Like I mentioned, bam, done, game over. Once Google decides that you're not relevant anymore, you're not. You're done. You might as well be dead. So real passive income, if you want it, here's how to get it. One, you've got to own it. This is essential. Absolutely have to own it. It cannot be licensed. You need to own it 100%. The thing about music publishing companies that I mentioned at the very top of this episode, music publishing companies, because the ownership is split between the publisher and the writer, or sometimes multiple writers, sometimes multiple publishers, it can be very difficult to get some things licensed. You have to work with every single one of those owners. If you own something 100%, you're able to make the decision right there. You don't have to go through some kind of administrative company, don't have to go through some kind of attorney, don't have to run something up the corporate flagpole. You're much more likely to make money. You've got to own it. You don't want to be sending out somebody a royalty check for every time your content is used. That's what you want people to be doing for you. You want them sending you the royalty check. You can make big money by being associated with somebody, but that is not passive. An example of that, people playing in a band. Let's say that I got the guitar position for Kiss. Well, I can go out, make a good 6 figures a year playing for Kiss, maybe 7 figures a year playing for Kiss. But I don't own any of their content. I'm going to make more money owning the logo, owning the name, owning the imagery of the characters that the people in Kiss dress up as. That's where the money is made. You see what I'm saying? You can be associated with a guru or be associated with an event by speaking at an event. You can be associated with a well-known brand. That's going to bring people in. That's not passive, though. You want to own the well-known brand. What does that mean? That means all the intellectual property. You want the copyright, you want trademarks, you want patents, you want anything that can be licensed. If you want to go out and promote it beyond that, great. That's going to help that passive stream of income, but you 100% have to own it. As a side note, real property, not intellectual property, but literally real estate, it's a great form of passive income. Let somebody else manage it for you. Those are the only two ways for you to make passive income, though, is one, intellectual property. And again, you can let somebody else manage that for you. So owning the idea, or two, owning real property where somebody can put a building up and lease the land from you, or drill for oil and pay you for the rights to do that. Those are the only two ways for you to really make passive income. So what can you do right now? Let's throw out real estate for a minute, get back to intellectual property. One, buy up intellectual property. Find people that are undermarketed, pay them a flat fee, and start buying their content, buying their books that haven't been used, buying blog posts, buying ideas, buying things that you can turn around, make your own, own everything for, and then start marketing yourself. In addition, you can create your own content. In addition, what I'm telling you not to do, the mistake that most people are making, there are a lot of people doing it, writing things for other people. You can hire people. Go to sites like Odesk, Elance, Freelancer.com, whatever they're calling these things, Upwork. You can hire people to write the content for you. You own it. You can make passive income that way. Or alternatively, if you don't mind doing the work once, you don't want to just throw money at something, you create the content. But whatever you create, don't give it to magazines. Don't give it to websites. You keep the copyright on it because you never know. Think about me with that audiobook, Steve Martin, 5-Figure Payday. Had no idea. It was a throwaway project. I didn't think that it was worth anything. It wasn't that good. Universal Pictures comes to me, hey, we want it, 5-figure deal, let's make it happen. Done. Passive income all day long. I was in the music licensing business for several years. I've done dozens of deals like that. It happens, but you must own the content. You've got questions, you've got comments, reach out to me. I'm online. At David Hooper on Twitter is the way to get to me. And to find out more about Walter Palmer, this Minnesota dentist that the internet is just crucifying, got all the links at redpodcast.com/166 in the episode notes. Also the link to the new John Ronson book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed. Interesting perspectives on internet culture. And you as an influencer, you're going to relate to this because that's one of the top fears that we have as humans, but especially people like you, people like me, when we put ourselves out there, that somebody's going to somehow turn on us. It's happening right now to Walter Palmer. That's why you want to go to redpodcast.com/166. Find out what he did, learn from it, so it doesn't happen to you. On the next episode of Red Podcast, I'll be talking about spreading yourself too thin. Are you doing it? We'll talk more about that subject on the next episode. Thanks so much for listening to Red Podcast. If you go to redpodcast.com, you can subscribe via iTunes. You'll never miss an episode. Again, thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next episode of Red Podcast.
You've been listening to Red Podcast, Real Entrepreneur Development. Subscribe today using iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS at redpodcast.com.